Okay, welcome back to Budget 2023. We are going to dive right into community grants that we have for organizations. I'll just get my PowerPoint brought up. So currently we have grants to Vegreville Transportation Services Society for $22,000 and then Prairie Tales Animal Rescue for $17,000. And there is one more grant in here. It's the block funding for the Centennial Library, which is at $254,078 right now. There we go. So I don't have the library one on here, but we do have it in the summary. So are there any comments, concerns? The library one has been reflective of the library budget that has been presented to us at the last legislative meeting. The Prairie Tales and Vegreville Transportation Services Society, those are at 2022 values. So they haven't expressed a need for additional funding. So we left it at the exact same. So I will leave it to you guys.
So is there any comment on either one of these? Is there, everybody's fine? This is what they requested? Go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
I just was curious, I think it's Councillor Warwa that's on BTSS. I know that they had talked about replacing the vehicle and their fundraising was a bit of a challenge given their board composition. Is that, how are things going there? I mean, we haven't heard from them, but I guess just saying that the standard grant is what they were looking for.
I think their primary where they're at the standard grant is because they're still kind of in that process of figuring out what vehicle and to what extent, so they wouldn't really be, they have a small reserve that they've been creating for the replacement. Right now it's been more that these fees are able to cover them for the services they're providing. However, of course, that could change if ever they're in a position of needing different drivers, which is why there's bigger conversations, to be had with there. But there hasn't been an ask for increase, so I think that's good at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see anybody that wants to change anything here, so it's be the same. Okay, so we'll move on to the library request, and that is 250.
254,078.
And last year, our funding was at 200,000, correct?
That is correct.
Because of the anomaly of the pandemic, and they were not in needs as they were before when they were open on a full-time basis. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Warwick.
Sorry, Megan, I don't know if you have this in front of you for a little bit back, but can you give us just a comparative of just a pre-pandemic number?
You know what? I can pull it up. Just give me 2 seconds.
I have it here too. You want me to grab it?
If you have it handy, I
Yeah.
have to log into our budgeting.
So I do have the previous submission, the actual budgeted amount in 220, the transfer from the Vegreville, or town of Vegreville, was $250. $250, or $250,000.
It was a big difference.
Yeah. Add a couple zeros.
You don't have the year before, I'm just wondering, because they were
I don't have
already in
2019.
pandemic by that point?
But we would have decided that in 2019, right?
Okay.
The 2020, we would have determined in
Oh,
2019.
so that's not a year to date, that was just a,
That was the amount that was transferred from the town of Vegreville for 250. Yeah, and maybe you can look back there. I mean, this is what is in our budget ledger from the library board.
So 2022 budget was a net ask of 200,000. 2021 budget was a net ask of 193,013. And then just moving back a couple more years. 2020 budget was a net ask of 250, and 2019 budget was a net ask of 253.11. So we are very much moving back to pre-pandemic dollar values.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it was explained a little bit when the budget committee was here with the former chair and the current chair when they presented that basically that's what they were trying to recoup is go back to that pre-pandemic operational standard, allowing for COLA as well as some other inflationary costs. But they've done a deep dive on all of the human resources costs and how many people are working there and doing a comparator between other libraries of similar sizes. And actually breaking it out in terms of position, and et cetera. So some of this would be available to council, and I think this was the documentation that was shared at the presentation. But it is very similar, going back to pre-pandemic levels with a little bit of a cost override, taking into account inflation.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Lento.
Yeah, when you mentioned the ask was 253 and change and 250, was that the actual then in the end?
It was close to, yeah. Actually, 2018 budget, the budget was 253.10, and there's actually $271,000 in the actual. So I don't have exact dollars as to why that one was over. 2017 budget was 246,000. The actual amount spent was also 246,000. So they have been spending close to 250 for a number of years.
Okay, so status quo, everybody's good at the 253, 254.
It seems in line with what they've been doing.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Yes, Your Worship. They've also gone through some of the expenses that we have, including Northern Lights increase, so they'll receive that same Northern Lights increase. So I think their budget is completely in line right now.
Okay, seeing nobody else saying no, I guess the library's request will go forward as per their budget request there, so, good. So next up, we have an opportunity to talk about user fees. So we all know that when we raise taxes, and this proposal, this budget we're looking at today, brings it back, the 2% increase brings us back to where we were 2 years ago as far as our tax collection goes. But we already have heard from our directors and our CAO where we're at when it comes to our services that we offer and the amount of fuel and the prices on fuel. And everything that we do today in our infrastructure projects comes in way over what we imagined the cost to be, or what we were told through our engineering services. So, and by adding another 2% onto taxes, it then brings up where we are at based in the actual averages with other towns. So I would like for us to look at our water, our garbage collection, and our infrastructure cost going up $1 each every month. And I just think this is something that needs to happen because of what we're seeing out there with inflation. So I'd be willing to take any discussion on, or anybody what their feel about that, so. Go ahead.
So, as your worship has explained, and maybe Megan, can you tell us again where the graph was that showed where we are with relation to some of the user fees? Because I realize that some of these costs, for example, water has been one of those that has largely been, I don't know how to say this, because of course it is an expense, but it is a very nominal cost for the service that people receive compared to the actual cost of maintaining the system. So water provision is extremely expensive. Replacing water mains, some of the big decisions that we've deferred or taken on year to year can be incredibly expensive. And when we're talking about a nominal amount that we're collecting from citizens, I would just like to see that tied together somewhere. And I understand that we need to start somewhere, so no different than garbage collection, or waste collection. We don't have that actually linked to what the cost of providing that service is, or putting it towards something that would be beneficial to the town long-term, like waste diversion and having some waste-to-energy plans in the near future. I mean, I've been talking about that for a long time. I understand that it's not on the table today, but I would like to see some of the things that we're deciding in terms of user fees be linked to provision of the service long-term. No different than we have reserves accumulating for North Parkway drainage, for example, was a good reminder for us to be able to put in some of that flood mitigation and link some of our actions today to some of the long-range planning. I would like to see some of our user fees linked to the actual cost of providing that service in a long-term planning fashion. So I don't know if we have that capacity. I know if you could just point me out to that page again, and I know that we don't necessarily have that. I'm asking in a rhetorical sense. I know that we don't have that cost linking right now.
Yes, and like I said, so the sales and user charges per capita, the blue line, we're below the median cost here. So as far as all towns, we're low. But like I said before, you have to look at these in an aggregate, so there's no real way to say that we're much lower or higher. Like, we have to look at all of the costs together as an aggregate, but as far as sales and user charges go per capita, we are lower than most other municipalities. We're below the median line. Just another comment, I had talked about this earlier, is that the projected increases in taxes is not gonna change our little bubble on these graphs at all, very much, like just marginally moving up. So we're gonna stay very much the same as where we were on the graph. Like, we're not proposing a tax hike that would bring us all the way up here. It would just be slightly higher. So that, the tax rate increases isn't drastically changing our position on this graph. So where we're at right now, we're low on user fees. The projected tax increase isn't increasing us on that graph whatsoever, and there is room to charge additional on the utility bills.
Go ahead, Councillor Warwick.
So for me, I think that I look at it, I know any increase, people don't like to see the increase, but I think that it's very understandable, particularly if we were looking at a dollar raise on each one of them, that even if we didn't improve a system or rebuild a system, just the cost to operate that system, the additional, even the additional carbon tax that we pay or any of the rest of it, it's the operating cost of it. And I think that it seems pretty defendable to say your water cost in here is going up $1. I just feel like that's something that I could live with. And I do agree at some point we might want to see them linked, some of these linked back into the replacement of, but right now, to me, those dollars are literally just covering some of that increased cost. And I think we're still going to be finding it tight, because I think once all the numbers come and the next increase comes, we're going to spend a lot more than maybe we were thinking. So I'm comfortable with the dollar all the way through.
So my point, no matter what, is that in the last 3 budgets that the town of Vegreville has brought forward, we have been using up reserves to offset tax increases. We gave a 2% tax reduction, and again, we pulled a lot of money out of reserves to function. And we need to get to the point now that if we get through a year in a normal budget, that we can have the opportunity to start replacing some of these reserves, and with some user fees covering the additional cost through inflation pressure. I just feel that that's the best way for us to go right now, because if we stay where we're at right now with no increases and the cost of fuel alone, there will be no way that we can go back to start trying to feed some of these reserves for future plans. And we need to take that into account. I mean, we did what we could for as many years as we could, living out of reserves and keeping taxes as low as we could, but it's not very prudent of us not to get to the point where if we can get through a year, a normal year, that we have some money that we can make decisions to move forward with. And what I'm proposing here is really only covering the cost of providing the services, and probably not even. So, if you guys would be willing to wait on and have the senior admin bring back what that looks like to the budget itself. And go ahead, Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we should actually identify which areas we are looking at increasing that $1 on. We've said in general terms. I believe our notice has 2 or 3 different locations where we're charging, it might be about $6 right now. I don't think that, I think what we need to do is we need to be able to identify what we're actually talking about here in terms of a fee increase.
Okay, you've got flood mitigation and storm drainage at $5.81 per month. Residential garbage, because the cost of fuel is definitely one to look at, that's at $6.77 per month. Infrastructure replacement fee is $4.84 per month. The sewer charge is $4.55. The recycling fee is $6.77. And then the service charge of $5.32, which is administrative service charge.
So what I'm asking is, are we looking at straight across $1 on each of those? Because that's quite a few numbers there that we just saw or were just reported. So I think that's some clarity that I'd actually like to know before I agree to $1 across, because we're not just increasing $1 each month if there's 5 or 6 different areas that we're talking about.
And my proposal is that on 3 of them, of those monthly charges, that we increase 3 of them by $1. The flood mitigation, the price on that right now is based on basically the debenture payback, and that's where we set it at. And it's not like we don't have any problems with our storm sewers.
Yep.
But overall, that can get funded through the infrastructure cost. So, I mean, I might as well, there's no other good way for us to charge out other than tax increases to try to offset some of the cost of inflation and our services we deliver. And to hit all of them at once, you know, it maybe doesn't sound like much when it's 6 of them, you know, and it's $72 a year. But if we can start here, and my goal is that we get to the end of the year and not use up more than what we're taking in the budget here. So like, we don't know where fuel is going to be at. So those are the 3 that I feel that we can defend the most, is the extra cost in just providing those services.
Yeah, okay, I could probably agree to those 3. The aspect is if we're also looking at the fact that we've used a fair amount of our reserve over the past couple of years, I would actually be in favor of increasing the taxes by 1% in order to put that money back into reserve. So I mean, like, we do have 2 streams. We have the tax stream, which actually is based on the assessment of a person's house or business, versus a fee where everybody who pays a water bill gets nailed. So I mean, like, we have 2 different ways of increasing the monies. If we're looking at monies going into reserve, it should be through taxes. If we're looking at these as offsetting the costs of what it is for the service, I tend to agree with Councillor Rudick in some cases, and the argument I've been making for a lot of years, we're really not certain whether the cost per cubic meter of water covers the delivery of water. So, I mean, that's another, are we going to increase the cost per cubic meter of water? Because it's actually fairly low. So I think that we need to throw out and do a little bit of discussing as to where we should be at on some of these charges.
Well, to say that we don't know if the rate that we charge per cubic meter of water covers the delivery of the water system within our town, I think we do know it does not. It definitely does not. So that all falls under infrastructure and public works, right? So they never make money. But to me, to raise taxes right now, when we are below the average on user fees, makes sense to bring it up to try to. What I'm trying to get to is to get to the end of the year that we're not taking money out of this year's 2023's budget to pay for inflation as we move forward. But I'm trying to get in front of it so that if we run our organization in a well-managed way, that there is the possibility that we can have some money to go to reserves. So, and then again, trying to keep our tax within our tax rate, our mill rate, somewhere close to what the average is. And, you know, and for small businesses and stuff like that, when they want to come to your community, they look at that and where you fall in the range. So by raising taxes even more, then than what we're asking for this year, when we can collect it in a user fee that we know we're below the average on. It just, in the overall outlook, when someone's looking to invest in our community, it just looks a lot better. And I'm not saying we're gonna have any money left. We don't know how the snow removal is gonna go this year. We could be, we could be $500,000 over. We don't know. But if we look at this now, we have an opportunity to collect some money with the hopes that our organization runs in a very smooth way and that the money is used the best we can, that there's an opportunity to have some money to put back in some reserves that we've been living out of for a few years. So that's all I'm asking with this user fee increase, so. And go ahead, sorry, Councillor.
Just to hop on the comment that Councillor Barry was referencing, I think the difference between user fees and taxes is your house can increase in value through absolutely nothing that you've done as a home or business owner. So it's a completely arbitrary figure that can be determined by an assessor. And as a homeowner or a business owner, the user fees is for something that you're potentially utilizing with an outcome that you can actually see or demonstrate. I mean, it's kind of either hand, it's still coming from the same pocket. The challenge is being able to link those to outcomes. And that's where I would see that as we're moving forward, I would definitely like to see more of a linkage between what we're charging and what we're forecasting as our costs, because I would say that historically our water costs, for example, are drastically lower than what the cost of replacing, we used to say $1 million for a block of deep services, and I don't think that that's an accurate figure anymore. So in order to do that accurately and prudently, I do think that we do need to look at our user fees, because we're under the market in terms of what's an acceptable value, and even some of the forecasting that was put in there for the reduction in some of the income that we've made in some places that we hadn't anticipated in the past. Like, we've made some good money at the landfill, which is not usually our way of operating. So just to clarify again, if we're doing $3 extra per month per household, plus the additional estimated tax increase. And sorry, Megan, if you can, Director Saski, if you can just, your first slide had the $3.28 per person?
So the first slide,
Yep.
if you don't mind, it's actually slide 3. Okay, so the net municipal tax increase is $3.28 per month for the average household, which is the assessment of 220,000. And then, with the additional user fees, so then now it'll be $6.28 per household on average.
So I would say that that's probably a pretty good, I think that's probably, I mean, nobody likes things to increase, but I think that's just a prudent way for us to be able to approach it. I do appreciate that we need to charge more. My concern is linking it to some kind of formula or some kind of practice to be able to plan better for the future. And, when groceries have gone up 11% this year, this is nowhere near that kind of increase. We're talking about, a nominal amount to be able to continue offer the services that people are expecting for now and into the future. So I don't have a dispute with the amount. I actually think that that's manageable for most people.
Okay, so is there anybody against these $3 a month and user fees being added to the bill to start?
No.
Okay. Thank you. What else did we need to talk about?
Am I listing here? So we said COLA, user fees, and the tax increase, so.
Okay, so we do have right now some room within this budget, and I'd like to bring forward a couple of things that have not been talked about. Is we are now taking applications for the new emergency manager position, correct? Is that the title?
Yeah, Manager of Protective Services, Your Worship, but just subtle change there. The offer was actually accepted yesterday. So we brought that, we got an accepted employment offer. We're going to be bringing that person on board November 14th.
Okay, this position would probably need a vehicle. So can we fund a vehicle for this position out of MSI? Or another,
I don't think we can do a half ton in MSI. No.
okay, so can we use the other grant?
I don't know.
Okay,
That I don't know off the top of my head. We normally fund.
Half-tons have always been operational.
yeah. So no matter what, this position needs a vehicle. We can't have somebody in their own vehicle representing that position. So I'd like to see how we balance that out.
Well, there is the municipal services number, municipal enforcement reserve too, which I believe is at $60,000. Let me see. Because the protective services manager does oversee municipal enforcement, so maybe he's bumping them out of their next truck.
I was gonna say, and now that we're talking out loud on that, I recall a vehicle being in the ME future forecasted budget here, was in this year's column and last year's budget, but we pushed it ahead because they can limp the
There's
curve.
$20,000 going into that reserve in this year's budget, and the purchase will be next year on that vehicle.
Yeah, and that was intended for the bylaw enforcement or the CPOs, yeah.
So the municipal enforcement, they're actually a little behind the eight ball. They have $100,000 in the fleet reserve for the replacement of their vehicles. So they have enough for 2 vehicles right now.
And we're funding that by 20,000 this year, correct, in this budget?
Yes, so we're funding it by an additional 20,000 this year. So it would be 120,000 at the start of 2023.
You had a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they'd be close next year, yeah.
So I think as we're having this conversation, I think it's probably important for us to have this conversation publicly too, to explain what this position is and what it is representing, how it fits into our organizational structure, as well as the costs that are an outcome of this position. So we may have had this conversation, but is it possible to maybe do a little bit more of an explanation of what this position is and what the implications are, not just the vehicle?
Okay, but I thought Director Saskew gave us an explanation earlier today, basically with the reorg and the changes we've made in our organization, and the HR and the finance manager and this position coming on, the difference from last year's payroll at the same pay rate, like the same without the COLA added, and what the new changes are, it's still under $20,000, correct, within the budget that we were shooting for. So in the position, if you want CAO Leggett can explain what the position is.
Yep, happy to speak to it. So that position, Manager of Protective Services, is going to be in charge of the protective services column portfolio on the organizational chart. They're going to be responsible for overseeing the operations of the fire department, municipal enforcement, the RCMP liaison, and then animal control, a little bit as well. Occupational health and safety, as well as emergency management for the town. So those big scale tornado type initiatives, that person will be responsible. So fairly diverse portfolio, but again, streamlined and coordinated now under a single individual with, good credentials in those respective fields. So, so that was the first piece of it. The second one that's coming on board is the fire chief / occupational health and safety officer. So that individual will be fire chief, boots on the ground on, emergency type scenes, as well as the actual boots on the ground inspection and oversight for occupational health and safety. So all of that's gonna roll up into the manager position. The manager will be one of the individuals here at the table for next year presenting the budget for protective services. That individual will be part of our weekly SMT meetings and so on and so forth, so.
And sorry, as a follow-up question, and sorry, Your Worship, I do understand that Director Saskew presented that earlier, but I think it is a new position, and it bears a little bit more conversation in this format too, because there are implications, not just the position, the salary, but obviously if there's going to be another vehicle in the fleet, this goes back to my comments that I had quite a while ago, is that if we've got a fleet that we're managing across departments, including a new position like this, I'm gratified to see that, I don't know that we could buy 2 vehicles for 100,000, but we could buy something, part of a vehicle, that we might be able to manage it this year, but I would like this to be part of the envelope that we're talking about when we're doing proactive financing of vehicles, if we're talking about a fleet, that we actually manage it that way. I know that we do that in practice, but I'd like us to have some way of budgeting that way as well, because I know that some of the vehicles that were auctioned off, for example, have been around for many decades. So they've more than made their way through the town operations. So for that reason too, are there other considerations that we need to take into consideration for this position as well as the fire chief? Besides a vehicle, are there other costs that are affiliated with this? Do we have a place, I'm assuming, for these individuals in our organization in terms of physical space? We're not building a new building or anything like that, but the actual salary and vehicle, that's all that we would be taking into consideration for this year and moving forward?
I guess to answer that, there'd be some small considerations for the fire chief in terms of PPE and uniforms and that type of thing, but no, I don't see too much more on the manager of protective services side. Even with respect to the vehicle, we may want to equip it, but that person isn't necessarily going to be tasked with emergency response as to a fire scene type of thing. That'll be the domain of the fire chief. So no, there's nothing else that I can really think of at the moment here that might be a significant cost consideration for that role.
And sorry, and then this question I'll direct towards you, Your Worship. So the presumption that this protective services manager would need a vehicle as compared to some of our other managers is based on what determination? Because we have other managers that use their own vehicles for their work all the time. So I'm just trying to understand.
I'm not sure which manager you're talking about.
Sorry, protective services.
No, which manager uses their vehicle that run between?
That we've got 2 in this room here that don't have town vehicles, 3.
Yeah,
So,
well-
and I'm not trying to get into a debate, I'm just trying to.
Well, it seems like you're trying to get into a debate. You asked me a question, you're expecting an answer. That's what debates are.
Okay,
So-
I would like to know if there is, what the justification is for one to have and not another.
Because of the position that we're asking for, I would imagine that we're not expecting this person to sit in their house when there's a fire call. He would probably want to go out and see how his staff is doing, these people that are under his control. He would probably have weekly meetings with the RCMP. He would probably be back and forth to this office from the fire station. And he would probably have to meet with the municipal enforcement people. He would probably have to go out and drive to a lot of addresses in this community with a truck that represents that he is now with the town of Vegreville. And for him to be on the site of 2 neighbors arguing and representing the municipal enforcement bylaw officers, to have a truck that says he's actually in the role of in charge of this. This is the debate you were looking for?
No, not a debate, an explanation. So thank you very much. That sounds very fulsome. I wonder if that may not be applied for some of our other positions as well. Maybe not with a stripe on the leg when we're having a ticket delivered or that kind of circumstance where we need to have the authority and the autonomy of a Vegreville employee delivering a message. But I think that justification satisfies my curiosity. There are others that maybe we need to consider moving forward, and that would be part of the conversation that we need to talk about, in my opinion. If we're talking about fleet management and who is available, no different than we have P-card policy now. Who gets a card and what, on what justification, so.
Well, we can definitely have that conversation. And some managers have allowances built into their contract for using their own vehicles. So just as long as everybody knows that. So the fact that this vehicle will probably have beacons on it and that they're representing the emergency services that'll have a role to play in any emergency that happens within our community, I just feel that when they show up, that they should have. So, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess I would say it would be a little bit even just that public awareness piece of their vehicle would be recognized. People would maybe make concessions for them to be able to move into that position. And as we go forward and we plan, and I understand what you're saying totally, Councillor Riddick, but I think as we move forward, we'd also have to look though at the role. Theoretically, we would have, say, somebody at our table here who might not have it, but I feel like probably they're not going to that person's house to discuss a financial issue at 9 p.m. where we might theoretically send over an emergency services. So, and I would think probably in the past, anybody that was in that role was using a vehicle as well. It was kind of in the similar. So planning is good.
Go ahead, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to get back to the reserve budget and what's there and how many vehicles.
Okay, so we better clarify what reserve he's asking about.
Yeah, I want to get
So
back
our
to the,
fleet reserve, specifically, we've been budgeting every year out of municipal enforcement, $20,000. So in 2022, their balance is 100,000, plus in 2023, they have an additional 20,000 budgeted in, so there's $120,000 available there. So options are to use municipal enforcement, as that does fall under the protective services umbrella, and then push the municipal enforcement vehicle out another year or two, or we could pay for this through operations, would be the
what's,
other
is there a
option.
min, or a reserve min on
There
that?
is no reserve minimum on this one. The maximum's actually 30,000, but our current balance is 340, but we are paying for the facilities vehicle out of there, so we're within our minimums for the next year, so.
What is the cost we're thinking? Because I see other fleet vehicles, 48, 55. Why is this not able to purchase two? Is there something special, something extra that goes onto it?
It's probably close to 20 grand to get it suited, siren lights, and everything, that's just what it costs.
So we're looking around probably 70,000.
And I would say minimum.
And I'm not sure that the vehicle needs to be at that level. That we're not asking this manager to play that role. What this manager is to manage those positions under him. I could see a set of beacons on this vehicle as, you know, like if he needs to get up close to something. In the emergency management side, I don't know. I mean, if we had a huge disaster in our community, I mean, I guess we'd have every vehicle we have out there involved, but I just think that this position needs something, some markings on it, and at least a set of beacons so that when they show up, that people realize that the position that he holds is, or she, whoever we're hiring. Oh, okay.
And I'm just asking that because instead of pushing, like, if we can make this work where we're not still pushing out the bylaw officer vehicle, right? If we have the room to do both, or we're not suiting it up as hefty or whatever as we thought, we can add another 20,000 in the next year and boom, we got both. It's just my thoughts, so.
We certainly could. Actually, Councillor Bullock's next.
Yeah, depending on the pricing of the vehicle, I guess I'd probably be comfortable with, pushing out the municipal bylaw vehicle for one more year. If we need this one right away, obviously, we're gonna need it. I think that's the way we should go. I'm not opposed to pushing out the bylaw vehicle for 1 year down the road. I don't think that's too hard to swallow.
Okay, so that's something different than what we've been talking about. We've been talking about, because in this year's cycle of fleet management, that truck should now roll back into the fleet. And it is getting to the point where it needs to stay in town. So no matter what we do moving forward, I'm not, like, my suggestion was never to step the municipal enforcement vehicle back when that was not what I was going, because then we get way out of rotation with the vehicles, and it's got a lot of miles on it. So, I'm just saying, but you're bringing something forward, you would like now to consider just buying one there and not keeping the municipal enforcement vehicle in the rotation that it's typically been before.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Lemko.
Yeah, Your Worship, just a question. We still have the fire command vehicle, and at one point in time, we had the EMS command vehicle. Do we still own that vehicle? It's probably very low mileage, right? Can it be repurposed?
Currently, the command unit is sitting in the fire hall, and what we call it, ERV, the emergency response vehicle, it has a lot of hours on it. That's when we had a paramedic service of our own, and they would keep their meds in the unit, and it had to keep running to keep temperatures from freezing, so it has a lot of hours. But we use it all the time for fire inspections, for business license inspections. We use that unit as an administrative unit for the fire hall always, so that option is there for sure. For the next couple of years, if you want to start putting some money away for a vehicle. There is two vehicles. Fire chiefs in the past, well, before us, would take the command unit home. They just had it 24/7, and then they could respond right from home. So in the fire hall right now, there is two units, command unit and the RV, that are both sitting there ready to go if you wanted to budget and buy a vehicle next year.
There's an option. So you guys will look at that and then bring something back for the next budget meeting, a recommendation, what you feel may work. Go ahead, Councillor Riddick.
So we're having these conversations about the fire department, and I appreciate that there might be two that we could use right there. But if we're having these conversations about the fire department, are we having the conversations with the fire department? So I would be curious to make sure that we're delivering or having these conversations with the crew in a way that's timely and us explaining to them what our thought process is. Obviously, council will make the decision when the administration brings it back to us, but if we're having these kind of conversations, I would guess that most of our fire crew are not watching our meetings, as interesting as they are. But it would be important for us to have those conversations with them. So will that be a message that's carried forward to them?
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Riddick. So answer on that is yes, and part of the reason we were looking to bring the manager of that department on board as quickly as we are is to allow us to have those discussions before the budget process is fully complete, right? Management of the executive level vehicles is not really a question for the crew. That's up to the management there for sure, so.
For sure. And sorry, maybe I should clarify a little bit more. What I meant is that the manager will be new, and I think that it's incumbent upon our organization to be able to deliver the message to those that have been there for a long time. So obviously there will be somebody in that position shortly, it sounds like. But I wonder if in the interim, if there's a little bit of an explanation or a delivery of message as we make decisions at this table that are affecting the outcome at the fire department, no different than us deciding that we will be looking at engine one replacement, et cetera, SCUBA or SCBA, et cetera. All of those decisions that we're making will affect them, but just making sure that we have that timely dissemination of information to them, which may be sooner than we have somebody that's actually here in that position. So
Quick answer to that is yeah, I actually, I'm in regular contact with the deputy chiefs about the what's unfolding with all of this. They were made aware of the hire as soon as it happened yesterday, so yeah, definitely.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so is there anything right now that anybody else wants to talk about? Infrastructure, is there a project, small project that you think is important that we might be able to squeeze into this budget?
No, I honestly don't. I think that before we came to you, there was a lot of, thank you. Before we came to present again to you, there was a lot of budgeting going on, as there always is, and I think what you were presented was not a cutthroat budget, but one that's reasonable and give us time to complete the projects. We're gonna have a large capital works project. We gotta finish up Prosperity Industrial Park. We got a lot of patchwork and roads. It's gonna be a busy summer, and if I just take on more, the chances are I won't be able to finish it anyway, with good luck. So what you're given was an aggressive budget for a lot of projects at a cost that wasn't much different than last year's out of IP&D's budget. So I'm thinking we're good.
Okay, Dan?
I feel I'll mimic the same. We're pretty good on our end, so.
Okay. Jameson?
Are you asking me if I want to spend more money?
What I'm asking you is, do you need more money for this consulting group to come on and help build that new department that you guys are taking on? And what you've shown me here today is basically they're willing to consult over a 6-month period as you transition this new department.
That's correct. When I brought the notion of a strategist to council in the preliminary budget workshop, we had earmarked a certain amount of money for that strategist. In further conversations, I have received a bit of an updated proposal from this group, and what they're requesting or what they're suggesting would put us slightly out of line as to what I asked for. It would be a little bit more. I believe that I could make the number that I have work in discussions with this group. I firmly believe that they would be a tremendous asset, and having a contingency fund of potentially $3,000 to $5,000 additional dollars wouldn't hurt. But with that being said, I would deem that more, it would be nice than an absolute need. So I'll leave that to council's discretion.
Okay, so go ahead.
This is just a question. I understand that it was smart, we have to build it, so we're going to have somebody give, some direction on that. But if they are doing that within 6 months, I'm just wondering if there is any need or concern to put away some funds for potentially even a somewhat assistant or part-time position. And the only reason I'm wondering about this is, at one time, there was a position that has shifted, but was doing some help work there. Like I've just given who all's in your department and how busy each of their groups are, I'm just wondering if we're not going to, within this next budget, see where there is an ask for potentially even a part-time assistant position in there. So maybe there isn't, but I'm just wondering if that's something we anticipate likely to happen. Sorry, I'm asking you to likely happens.
No, and it's a fair question. So, without making any promises to my team, because it was sort of out of my hands, we have had preliminary discussions on how we see this year folding out, and my team consists of obviously Lane and Anya, and Lane is going to handle a little bit more of the day-to-day communication stuff. And Anya obviously doing a tremendous job, as she has for a long, long time, in the tourism realm. And with being able to rely on myself to assist in the communications role, a big part of my role is actually being in this room a lot, right? Because we're running all of this stuff on top of that. In this year, based on those conversations that I've had, I don't see it arising that we would need to add somebody to our team. In my mind, when these conversations with CAO Leggett came up about, stepping into this new role, I knew it was going to be a challenge, but as you've already seen in the budget, my number one goal was to cut and to trim. And we did that in this department, and still being effective, I believe, and finding those efficiencies. This next year may present a challenge, and then next year, if we need someone, it would be at that point that I come to you. But we're all prepared, all three of us, to get ready and roll our sleeves up and go to work, because we have to prove before we can ask, as far as I'm concerned.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, there is going to be expectations of this department which has never existed before. And we're bringing in 3 different areas of what we do. Jameson has reached out to Canadian Strategy Group. They put a proposal together, and in the proposal, it's a 6-month ongoing thing. But if you're saying that if $10,000 more gets you to where you would feel comfortable with the consulting and support, you could get them there, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that based on the proposal that they put forward, when I do want to use the word, and I know we don't like the word consultant. These are strategists, this group, and they have connections that I don't have, and specifically political connections, and they are very in tune with what's going on right now with the provincial government. And in a few preliminary conversations that I've had with this group, they feel like now is the time to be applying pressure as a rural municipality, because the current government of the province of the day is going to be focusing very hard on rural, because they understand that's where their base is. So if we can make friends with this strategist company who are already friends with the provincial government, I feel it would be very beneficial. And I feel what they've sent in terms of the proposal is fair and would be a tremendous advantage to us. So to answer your question, yes, if you're offering more money for the strategist, I will take it.
And we got to remember too that our economic development department has been merged into here, that we're seeing a lot of savings there already. But the fact that we need the new department will need some help and how to move a boat in these same circles when it comes to economic development. And having someone there to guide them through this, because it's not as easy as one thinks. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't necessarily like the, do you need any more conversation, but I do feel like this is a department that, has the expectation that there be an outcome, measurement. And so in the past, a lot of that was covered by the CARES grant. So we did have, a number of different studies that put us in a place to be able to act. And so the outcomes were to be followed up on, and that's the follow-up here that I would hope that this group or any other strategist, along with Jameson and his team, would be able to follow up on some of those things so that we can actually measure, just as we had done, a number of years previously, put into place some measure that you can actually demonstrate that there is a success in this department. Because a lot of this is long-term relationship building, and you can't measure that. You can measure population, and that is something that I actually think would be an interesting activity for us as well, just given the number of families, for example, that we've acquired over the last year. So in order for this to get delivered in a way that's fulsome, I'm not opposed to that, so.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that either, because I think of all the money that has been invested here in economic development with that park. So I believe having more to work with there would be a definite asset right at this time for sure. So yeah, I definitely support that.
CEO Leggett.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and appreciate council's willingness to consider this and put it on the table. With respect to that department as a whole, one thing I'd just like to sort of remind everyone is that if I'm not mistaken, there's about $53,000 of savings, I think, just in the combination and efficiencies that have been created in ECDev. Those aren't just a one-year savings either. That's a long-term recurring annual savings versus what we were spending operationally in previous years. So if the concept now is an additional 10,000 once, in this first year as a baseline to get it set up for success, build those metrics, set those deliverables, in my opinion, that would be money well spent as well.
And more stress balls.
Okay,
Maybe.
so if no one's opposed, can you build that in to the final look? Number? Go ahead, Councillor Warwick.
Well, I just think, it's fair for us to say that we aren't just asking if somebody wants more money. We're saying we appreciate the fact that you have found these efficiencies and that you always come to us with what is the bottom line. But the reality is we want you to have the tools that you need, because we can't ask you to succeed if we don't provide it. And we appreciate your trying to give it to us on a reasonable level, but we want it on a viable level for you.
And I appreciate the sentiment there. At the end of the day, economic development, as I've said before, it's a long-term game. But now's the time, as Councillor Bullock referred to, and as I'm sure all of council feels, is to plant those seeds so we've got a forest tomorrow. And we've got a lot of very active farmland to plant seeds in. And right now, politically speaking, on the provincial scale, who knows how long that will last. But right now is the time to take advantage that we are a rural municipality based on these conversations with the strategy group. So I firmly believe that, while I made a joke about asking for more money, I did make a concentrated effort to cut our budget and to be very efficient, but this would be money well spent as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Sandra, anything in your department that? Nothing?
She almost looked shocked we asked.
CAO Leggett, where are we at with overall?
Yeah,
Is there any place that we're lacking here, or?
Thanks, Your Worship. No, I honestly can't see any, and I think, the focuses of my desk for this year are going to be to continue to build the team, to implement these new positions, to look at some of the practices and processes, and then, like I've committed to you guys in the recent past here, to start engaging with council to bring back some of the foundational documents and look at the future. Refresh ourselves on what those previous studies and reports have led to, and continue to engage in that kind of interaction. So from my desk standpoint, no, I don't think there's anything that's really lacking or would need to be included here.
Well, I think we're all looking forward to this organization, the changes we've made to hit its stride, or hopefully by the spring, and that the new departments will be up and running, and the new people in their positions will be comfortable, and we're looking, hopefully to be successful in what we do in the next year. So, Director Saskew,
Yes, Your Worship.
what do you see as the biggest challenge with this budget moving forward?
The biggest challenge with the budget, obviously, like the inflation, cost of goods, ensuring that we are employing and providing our employees with fair pay. Obviously, CPP, EI rates go up every year, so if we don't do COLAs, the federal government is downloading to us basically because they're increasing those rates, and if we keep rates the same, the people that are on their max grid aren't bringing home the same dollars as the prior year. So I think what's reflected in this budget is a fair increase, and obviously I'll change it to 3%. We have some money going into reserves. We're looking at these new user fees. It'll be interesting to see where all of this lands after I make these adjustments and bring them back to you. I believe it's on the 22nd of November.
Do you have any questions to clarify anything about what we talked about today?
No, nope, I have everything written down. So I have to adjust the COLA to 3, to add in the additional 10K for the event center, update the COLA numbers for everybody, so we're not excluding the summer students, et cetera, because it's marginal and we want to attract good workers. Looking into the protective services truck, the increasing for the strategist money, and then I also have another note here that maybe let's look at putting money specifically into a fleet reserve every year. So I'm gonna bring that back the next time, see if we can fit that in the budget. So instead of just having money going into general reserve, we know we purchase a vehicle every year, so maybe we should be budgeting in fleet, a transfer to reserve annually.
We do have $20,000 going in, though, on the protective services.
Yes, specifically for the municipal enforcement vehicle, but we don't have for all the other fleet vehicles that we buy every year. So that's something that I'm gonna look at as well.
Okay, we'll start with Councillor Wemko. Is there any thoughts that you have right now where we're asking senior men is what we've given them today to bring it back? And hopefully that we're gonna have something by the next meeting that we're all gonna think that it's livable, that we'll all accept, so.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. My kudos goes out to administration for putting together a budget as well documented and presented to us. It's a fair budget. It's one that I believe our citizens can accept and moving forward. So I want to just say I'm happy with it and thank you for the numbers you put together.
Well, thank you. Councillor Curtis, any thoughts or anything that you see we're lacking in or that?
Thank you. No, really, I mean, all the asks that were brought forward from admin, I think were well needed in the budget. We were able to keep most things in, after, having to do a little tax raise plus doing COLA, and everything's falling into place using our grants properly. I mean, it looks fairly efficient and well job done to everybody, so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Riddick?
I've had the good fortune of being on council for a number of years, so this would be my 12th budget discussion. And it's quite different from the first time that I came. So I appreciate that as council, we came together and put a strategy together for our strategic plan that people and culture, growth, quality of life, and infrastructure were our priorities. And I can see that demonstrated in some of the decisions that were made by all of you here and our staff, and some of the discussions that we had here. So I will look forward to continue to see that demonstration. And for example, we've got some new positions like at HR, and I can see some of the efforts in that department already to try to build culture. And I will look forward to council supporting those types of decisions to continually support the people that work for us in this organization and deliver the services that we provide. So thank you.
Councillor Warba?
Yeah, I would say very similar to my colleagues. I feel that we've done a responsible budget under this. I think that we have looked at protection for services and quality of life, been able to balance that out. I appreciate that, you guys came to us with things pretty pretty low cut down. So that did help quite a bit. But I also appreciate that there are some items that we saw, and I'll give this kudos to Dan in the fact of there are items that we didn't, that still came to us even though they weren't necessarily budgeted at this point, but it made us think into the future and it made us think about things like reserves and putting away and other things that could be developed. So I appreciate that. Again, we did hit a lot of our strategies. And, you know, the only thing I might throw there is I still think whether there needed to be funds allocated or whether it's something we just do, I think that there was value in council getting together and having a bit of a, you know, I don't know if you want to call it a retreat or a get-together session like we did at the beginning of this year, because it put us on the page to make those decisions a little bit more aligned. I know that sometimes it's do you do it right after an election. Things don't have to be some large cost. It's not like a reorg type of thing. It's literally a get back down, everybody have a discussion, because I think it kept the council as a whole moving forward with a stronger direction. So maybe just a thought as to if that would be viable still within the budget, and that's my only other thing.
Well, I do believe in the legislative budget that once we make all the changes within the organization by the spring, when everybody's up and running, that just in our own personal budgets and that aren't used, we'd be able to
Get together.
and do something like that and have a good conversation.
Yep.
Councillor Bullock, anything you need to, that you want in or out, or this is?
I don't need to say too much about what's going on. You guys covered it all very well. You guys did a great job, so we'll move on forward. Some of us are still learning, so that's good too. So, good job.
Thank you, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your
You
Worship.
needed to see that usually there's something that you'd like to bring forward.
I'm not going to disappoint you. Actually, I would like to encourage you to take a look at the Fleet Reserve. I think that that's an appropriate move to look at the aspect. We know that we're probably going to need a vehicle every year, so we should be having that in reserve so that we're not debating as to whether we can afford that one. And then that way we can only debate if at some point in time we need two. So that I'd like to see it in a reserve so that we're more regularly replacing the vehicles in an appropriate manner. So I like that part. The actual aspect is I have to echo Councillor Rudick on saying that budgets have become an awful lot nicer since everything has been changing over here. The process is getting better all the time. You definitely delivered it. I'll have to say the best that I've heard. It was very straightforward, very clear, very easy to follow. You did an excellent job on it. And I think all of administration have done a lot of work on this over the last little while, and I've appreciated it. I made, my first budget didn't go this clear, that's for sure. So kudos, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, it's not a passed budget yet, so when you bring the lid back to us, and so I've seen things change a little bit at the end, so.
Trying to scare them just slightly.
But all in all, I think that, you know, what we took out of our council retreat when we first brought Chris on, and the direction that this organization is moving, the changes aren't all finished yet, but we're all looking forward to that when they are. And as far as I can tell right now, where we're at with the increase in this budget to bring us back to where we were 2 years ago in the amount of tax we're collecting, and like there was no more room to cut anymore within our operations. There was nothing left. And I'm hoping that this budget will leave a little bit at the end that we can get back into reserves and start putting some back. So that's what our plan is. So good luck, Megan, trying to put all the numbers together, and who knows? Maybe we don't need another vehicle. Maybe there's another vehicle that's sitting there that's not being used. Thanks for that information, Dale. I had no idea there was two. But, or Joe, thank you, or Councillor Lefko, sorry. So if there's no other business, budget business, then I'll adjourn this budget meeting right now at 2:22.
There you go. Make a wish.